Hey guys, welcome to the channel. It's Jack with Stronghold Strength and Conditioning. And today, I've got 4 hip flexor exercises to help you improve your hip range of motion. But before we get into it, make sure you take a moment and click that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on future content like this. Every Thursday, I'm putting out videos showing you how to resolve aches and pains, prevent injuries, and overall optimize your performance in the gym and in your daily routine. And it doesn't get much better than that. So, go ahead, jump on it. Ready? Let's dive into this one. All right, guys, the topic of the day, 4 hip flexor exercises to help you improve your hip range of motion. Now, some of you might be thinking, my hip flexors are always tight. Why would I want to be strengthening them? Why would I want to be working on them even more at this point? And the reason being is there's something really important we need to understand around that tightness. It's that our hip flexors aren't tight because we've worked them into that position. It's because they've been passively put into that tight, short position regularly through the adaptation of sitting all the time. We sit in a chair regularly, our hips adapt to that flexion, but it's not like we're actively using our own strength to pull ourselves into that seated position, now is it? We're sitting there, our hips adapt, and we can't really adjust for that. We also lack neurological control around the joint specifically, and our body doesn't know how to stabilize that weak area, so it naturally tightens it up. Usually when there is chronic tightness, or what seems like chronic tightness, it relates to weakness in some way. Start to make that correlation, and that's what we're going to do through strengthening the hip flexors in different positions here today, because the hip flexors work in a couple different ways here. We're going to be actually restoring motor control and patterning to the hip joint itself, which is probably what you're lacking, and that's why our bodies are locking up, trying to create stability in the ways that they know how, and whatever it is to survive and create stability. So, without further ado, let's get into these 4 exercises and talk a little bit about what's going on in them. Exercise number 1, the psoas march. So in this movement here, we really want to start by rolling the shoulder blades down and back and getting the lumbar spine flat to the mat. So I'm focused on keeping my low back flat to the mat the whole time here, because really we're testing the relationship of flexion and extension. So what you'll see from the movement of my legs is as I push one leg out, I'm actually drawing the knee of the other leg toward my forearm and elbow on that side. That's the hip flexion work. The extension of the other leg creates the relationship of the engagement of the glutes to the hip flexors. So I should feel my glutes engaging as I extend the leg out here. Now we're going to show a couple variations, so as we increase the difficulty, what you can do is go contralateral here and start to engage the upper body as well. What we're looking at is the relationship of our core and the overall stability of our core as we work hip flexion and extension here. Extending the arms out overhead makes this a little bit more challenging for us because we need to bring into that relationship the movement of our shoulders, believe it or not. So even though we're looking at strengthening the hip flexors here, we need to first of all be able to stabilize the spinal column and the core well first. So the main focus here, driving that knee high. How high can I pull it with those hip flexors while I'm pushing out the other leg? And then we can take it to a more advanced version here where both legs and both arms are extending out at the same time. Now, if this position is too difficult for you and you can't maintain the contact of the lumbar spine to the floor, that shows a restriction in your stability from the glutes extending out versus the hip flexors. You can start by doing a bent knee position to begin, but know that you must keep the low back flat in order to really benefit from this, so that we really start to open up stability from both the hip flexors and the glutes as we extend. The final version here I'm showing is a standing psoas march. So what I want to do is actually drive my foot through the floor as I draw the knee toward my chest. What you'll commonly see here is if people lack stability and range of motion is that their knee wants to cave and bend on the standing leg, and they're pelvis wants to tip under into posterior pelvic tilt as they get higher. So we compensate by collapsing the system here. We need to be able to fully extend that leg as we draw the other knee in. So think of that push-pull movement. So one leg pushes as the other leg pulls. You could always add a loop band to the feet to make this a little bit more difficult if you need, and let go of that post. Exercise number 2, hip internal and external rotation here. So now we're working from that hip flexed position once again, but I want to look at active internal rotation on this one specifically. So you'll see that I'm actually trying to draw my feet away from one another as my knees stay a little bit more narrow. So imagine yourself holding a yoga block between the knees or a ball between the knees as you did this one. What you want to feel is a lot of activation right at the pocket there of your pants. And that is our TFL. It acts as a hip flexor, but also an internal rotator. And we want to make sure that it can do both in that hip flex position. So that's what we're testing here. We're looking at internal rotation and our ability to actively go there in hip flexion as we hold that position. The next one we're going to look at is actually external rotation here. So what we're going to do is start by lowering the legs, crossing one ankle over the knee of the other. I'm driving the knee up toward my chest, holding the legs in place there. This is the natural resistance here of my hip flexors against the other leg. So I get a little bit of strengthening just from holding that leg in that 90-degree angle at the hip there. What I'm doing with the other leg is active external rotation. So I want to be opening the hip as much as possible as I press against that knee there. You'll see from a different angle here, I'll show both sides, so that I'm driving the knee once again up toward the chest here. That's our hip flexor work, and then externally rotating the other hip, trying to engage the glutes on that side, opening up that hip as much as possible. So it's self-resistance here. We got our own body doing the work. Exercise number 3, the glute bridge march. So in this one, we want to start with the shoulder blades rolled down and back once again, and engage the low back to the mat so that I'm coming up with the abs engaged. Here, I'm going up into full extension of the hip, and this is what we're looking at again, the relationship and our ability to fully extend the hip on one side, contralaterally, engaging the hip flexors on the other side here. So I'm driving that knee up to the chest as I drive the foot through the floor on the opposing side. Now, if you're a runner, this exercise right here is gold because we need this same relationship as we run. We need to be able to extend the hip back behind us into full extension while the other leg is activating the hip flexors to stabilize in that position. And last but not least, exercise number 4 is a variation of an lsit, but we're going to be working one leg at a time here for our beginner's version. So I want to sit as tall as possible with my hands planted. I might go into a little bit of flexion in the spinal column here, but I'm working at lifting the leg as high as I can with the leg as straight as possible. One of our quadriceps, actually rectus femoris, the one right down the middle, acts as both a knee extensor and a hip flexor. So it's important that we have the ability to flex at the hip with the leg fully extended as well. And this is what we're working on in this position here, full extension of the knee as we pull the hip into flexion. Now to make this one a little bit more challenging, we can lie back and go from a supine position here, rolling the shoulder blades down and back, getting the glutes engaged. I will have a little space in my lumbar spine this time, but I do want to make sure my abs are engaged as well. I'm hovering the heels low to the floor, and I'm drawing one leg up with the hip flexors, keeping that leg as straight as possible as I pull the other leg down toward the floor. So once again, we want that push-pull relationship. My glutes are engaging, pulling the leg that's close to the floor down, as my hip flexors engage to pull the leg up into that vertical 90-degree angle. Now, where most people have trouble here is that the knee will want to collapse on them. It'll try and bend. We can also try this position from starting at the top position and then lowering down from there. Once again, it might be a little bit easier for you to, first of all, actively engage the hip flexors and then pull from that position. But we also get a glimpse at the relationship of our quadriceps and our hamstrings in this position as well. All right, and there you guys have it. 4 hip flexor exercises to help you improve your hip range of motion. And if you guys like this video, make sure you let me know by clicking that big thumbs up below and share it with a friend, because you know everybody needs hips that are functioning at their highest. It is literally the motor of our lower body, and if it suffers in any way, shape, or form and lacks range of motion, then there's probably a good chance that we're going to suffer the consequences of that sometime down the road if we don't do anything about it. So you might as well start working on it today. If you have not already, make sure you take a moment and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on future content like this. Every Thursday, I'm putting out videos showing you how to resolve aches and pains, prevent injuries, and overall optimize your performance. And it really doesn't get much better than that. Welcome to the Stronghold Army. Lastly, if you guys want to take advantage of 7 days of programmed out mobility, then drop by the description here and sign up for the 7-day mobility training challenge. This is 7 days of pre-programmed mobility training that requires no equipment, that can help you start to identify limitations and restrictions that you have that you might not even be aware of, that are flying under the radar, waiting to cause you an ache or pain, really. So take advantage of that, jump on those 7 days, and begin today so that you can start to figure out where you need a little bit of work going on in that body there. All right, guys, I'll catch you next week. Have a good one.